So all of you are very familiar with me that are online. So you know that I'm Coach Wendy, and you know that I am doing what's called Wisdom Wednesdays with Coach Wendy. Hey Joy, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. And the whole point of Wisdom Wednesdays is really just to share hopefully some insights, some thoughts, things that we can discuss, things that we can share so that we can also all learn. It's not about just me sharing, it's about us sharing with each other and how we can help one another and how we can learn maybe just a few nuggets each week that can help us in our journey. And so today I kind of really wanted to talk about something titled, Has America Been Prideful? And if so, are we headed for a fall, a downward spiral? And what made me really think about that question is just everything that's going on. And when I think about even Proverbs, where it says that pride goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And I started thinking about, do we have a haughty spirit as a country? As a nation? I'd like to hear some answers. So, please share with me. Give me your thoughts. Do you think America has been prideful? Oh, yes. And then and arrogant. That's another word. So when we look at what does even prideful mean? It means that we're having an excessive high opinion of ourselves. I would say the answer is yes. And I have to definitely say that, I would actually fall into that category because I've always been proud to be an American. I've traveled all over the world and I've always been excited to have my U.S. passport and to be able to travel and go places. And I've always thought that in spite of a lot of the different things that we've dealt with here, it was still a really good place to be from. And it was still a good place to call home. And many of us have seen even pictures of when people come back from various situations, especially if there was turmoil. When they get off the plane, the first thing they do is kiss the ground, of America. And for those of us that either have family members, which I do, that have served and have been in the military or in one branch or the other that have served, and I'm sure that when we've had war and so forth, we're always happy when they come home and come back to America. But where does the line stop? I want to hear from everyone as it relates to where we're not arrogant, we're not too prideful, where we are content or happy to be from here, but where we don't start to think of ourselves better. Because I'm going to take this somewhere. Rhonda says, yes, we all are, but not at the expense of others. There's a difference between having pride in, and then she stopped. And so the point is, yes, there is the American dream. And America has been very prideful and arrogant. And so Rhonda says pride in and proud of. Yes, there is a difference between pride in and pride of. Now let's take that and let's just keep it domestic. Let's just keep it internally to the United States. Do we feel that, this is an interesting question because I've had a debate with several people about this, that there has been white privilege? Do we really think that there's been a mindset of white supremacy against other nationalities, ethnicities, and so forth that have been here in America? And I'm actually just going to keep it real. Let's just keep it to, African Americans right now and Black, because that's what we're dealing with right now as a country. We're talking about Black Lives Matter. And this doesn't mean that other lives don't matter, because they do. But we're talking about Black Lives Matter. So I see that Sabra says yes. Jasmine says absolutely. And usually when I ask this question or I have this conversation, because I have friends across the gambit, the answers are different oftentimes between white America and Black America. And I was recently reminded that sometimes I sit on the fence in terms of being half white and half Black, but I tried to remind people that in America, I'm Black, and I'm proud of that. But I'm proud of both my white heritage and my African American heritage. But I can tell you this. I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that I know that there has been some levels of racism, some levels of white supremacy and white privilege. But what I will say is, it's not always bad about privilege, because privilege can be across the board in so many different areas and different ways. But what are you doing with that privilege? What are you doing? No matter who you are, what are you doing with that privilege? And the other question becomes, are you silent? Or are you making your voice heard? Rhonda says again, yes, on being taught that they have the right to do to others whatever they deem necessary. Jasmine said, growing up in a predominantly white school and in the Middle West, I have to explain to some of my white friends about their white privilege. Yes, and that's across the board. Now, the interesting thing is, I like how you brought that up, Jasmine, because depending on geographically in the United States where you are, people experience things a little bit different. But it doesn't mean it still doesn't exist, because sometimes there's overt, types of racism and so forth, and it depends on where you are, or people always trying to make excuses or apologize. Rhonda says, taught this, okay, I don't know what that TGRU is, the years by the actions of their parents. And that is, most of the time, we act the way that we do because of how we were raised. Had that conversation this morning when I was having a conversation about the difference between Republican and Democrat, and how oftentimes people tend to follow that party. Let's even take it to religion. Oftentimes children follow the same path as their parents, but do they stop and understand what they believe and why they believe it, and why are they still going down a particular path? And so when we talk about, even, is America prideful? Or has it even experienced arrogance, which was brought up? The answer is yes, there has been. So now, taking this to the next step, I just kind of wanted to think about some words that I wanted to share with each of us to think about. So does anyone understand what unconscious or implicit bias means? Anybody? These are new words. Right now we have been really surfacing words that always have been there, but have been part of conversations that people have had a hard time having. And now's the time to have these conversations. So when we talk about unconscious bias, which is also known as implicit bias, I'm going to actually read it to you so that we make sure we're very clear. It's defined as prejudice or unsupported judgments in favor or against a person or a group. And oftentimes we compare people, as it relates to unconscious bias or implicit bias. And usually when people have that type of conversation, it's in the conversation around diversity and or inclusion, equality or equity within the workplace. But it's when basically we have like prejudgments. And again, if we're honest, most of us have some level of that at all times. We can't help it. It's about where you were born, where you're raised, how you were raised, what you've been exposed to, what influences do you have. The question becomes, are you willing to be open enough to learn what maybe was wrong, or maybe how you've been acting was wrong? Rhonda says that oftentimes people don't even realize that they have that, or that they are practicing it, and that it's also inherent. And that's true. So think about it. Prejudice just means prejudge. That's basically what we do. And most of the times we all do it. It's just sometimes it's in a way that harms often a group of people or a lot of people. So usually, if we're honest, how many people say, if we're African American, if we say those white people? And if you're white on the phone, on the call here on Instagram, how many of you might say those black people? Well, how come we can't just judge people by individually, each person? Because, if one black person does something wrong, all of a sudden the whole race has to pay the price. But usually if one white person does something wrong, we just say that person. It's assumed it's just that person. Why are we doing that? Why does that happen? Sabra Marie says, Asians are bad drivers, or often sometimes what someone might say, or black people are all athletic. Well, that ain't true. Not in this house. Yes, they're stereotyping. Yes. And what else? Okay, so hey, Miss Q, good to see you. She said that she does too. So again, we have to look internally as well as externally if we want to have solutions. So let's just, kind of keep this moving, because my heart has been really heavy. And it just seems like as soon as I get better, something happens again. How many of you have heard recently about the 3 hangings of the 3 African Americans? How many of you heard about that? I'm waiting. Okay, how many have heard about Rayshard Brooks, who was killed in Atlanta in the drive-thru? Well, he wasn't killed in the drive-thru, but he fell asleep in the drive-thru at Wendy's. Yes, that's happened. All this, even since what we've been going through behind George Floyd, and we're still dealing with that. So, how is America going to really deal with that? Yes, it is strange fruit, Sabra, because people are calling these lynchings not just where they've been hung, because some people have been saying that they killed themselves. Really? One was done in Palmdale, one was done in Victorville, which were not too far from each other, and then the other one that I read about was in New York. And there's a rise in some hatred across the board that has to be stopped, because it is escalating, as Rhonda says. We have to stop that. So, okay, how do we move forward? We already know that America has been prideful. America's been arrogant. But how do we as individual citizens start to make a difference? How do we help change that? I think all of us have an opportunity, as I was saying, to make a difference. So if we believe that America has been prideful and has been arrogant, which it has been, but we're Americans, even though the majority of us on this particular show right now are African American, we still all have a role we have to play. We all have to help make a difference, whether we're African American or white. We have to do what we can do to de-escalate the situation, but still hold people accountable. There has to be accountable, and we have to deal with justice. Otherwise, it's not going to get better. It's not going to happen. And it starts, again, with conversations and listening. Now, what else can we do? Hey, Reverend Logan, good to see you. I see that you've joined us as well. Good to see you. Thank you so much. So, I see what you said, Portia. Okay. All right, Jasmine, you're saying stop letting people around you say racist things. Great. That's a good one. That's excellent. That's holding people accountable, no matter who it is. Because if we want people to stop talking about us, we got to stop talking about them. We got to make sure that we're all basically living up to what we're preaching. Are we just teaching, or are we preaching, or are we speaking? We got to live it. We got to walk the talk. All right. So it's been said that opportunity often follows adversity. And we know that we're in adverse times right now. So what opportunities can we take? And today, usually I give everybody a call to action at the end. But today, I want to hear from all of us that are on this call. I want to hear 3 call to actions that we can each take this week as it relates to helping, America, de-escalate, kind of bring down that prideful attitude that has been there, in order to try to experience brotherly love, in order to experience where we can all live into this country together. And I wanted to see if somebody has something. I saw someone say we need to hold people accountable as it relates to when they say racist things. Thank you, Jasmine. I'm going to write that down because I want to keep track of what our call to actions are. What's another one? Speak up and stand up. Okay. Thank you, Jasmine. Good one, Sabra. Try not to run from uncomfortable conversations. Yes. Let me hear something from some of the men on the call. I like to hear from one guy. Tell me what you believe is one of the call to actions we can have this week. Okay, so far the theme has been that we're going to hold people accountable no matter what. we're going to speak up and take a stand. We're going to try not to run from uncomfortable conversations. You know, if we're speaking our truth, it's all like I used to tell my children all the time, it's not what you say, but how you say it. So sometimes people will miss the message because they can't get past the messenger. In other words, if you yelling and screaming and, you know, just all those kind of ranting and raving, people may not hear you. But if you can speak in such a way where you can get your point across, you know, it'll stay with them a lot longer. Okay, I still haven't seen any of my guys coming up here with anything. Yes, we can educate ourselves. Perfect. That's another one. So before I bring closure, I'm hoping to hear from one of the guys. Oh, thank you, Reverend Logan. He says, got to get to a call, but we have to change the language to reflect the truth that there's only one race, the human race. No white supremacy. No white supremacy is self-worship. Therefore, it's idolatry. Excellent. Thank you so much for leaving that with us before you had to go. Rhonda says, to those that need to understand what it is, what we want as blacks, as African Americans, yes. So that's the key. I think that's a great way for us to close our session today, is that we are all one race, the human race. That is so true and so important. And right now we are working on hoping to bring to the surface some of the issues around Black Lives Matter so that we can move forward. So again, I want to thank each of you for joining me for another Wisdom Wednesday. I hope you were able to get a nugget from today, and that if you want to learn more about the work I do or how I may be of service to you, please visit wendygladney.com. And the way I like to sign off each week is healing without hate. It's a choice. It's a lifestyle. Pass it on. Thank you so much. Thanks, David, for joining us. I know we're about to jump off, but thank you so much for joining us. God bless and have a wonderful week.